Hello, everyone, and welcome to our very first ever script writing workshop for the Degrassi Kid Discord. This is definitely an experimental kind of event because I've never hosted something like this before, but I'm very, very, very excited about it. And this is actually a really good crew to test it out with because I think we can all be pretty comfortable with each other, which is really, really nice. So tonight I'm going to be walking us through a workshop assignment, and we're basically going to repeat the success that Heinz Sanger had with his program. So some people have come tonight with fully formed ideas. I know that you've been working on story ideas for a long time. Some of you have little nuggets, and some people are just here to chill and watch and maybe type in the chat sometimes. Whichever way you've shown up to this meeting tonight is totally great, and I'm happy to have you here. And the first part is going to be a lot of me kind of explaining some things, talking about some things, and then later on I'll be asking for some input and to hear your thoughts about good Degrassi characters to write about and story ideas. But for now, prepare to listen to the Degrassi Kid podcast, basically, while I chat your guys' little ears off. So I think most people tonight have probably heard the episode. My most recent podcast episode was about Mr. Heinz Sanger, who was a creative writing teacher in 1989. He had used Degrassi a few times in his lessons, and it got the attention of a journalist, or a publicist at CBC, who asked if they would like to arrange a class where the Degrassi kids can come visit him. And the way that I relate to Heinz is that he hears something like that and thinks, I'm going to go even bigger. I'm going to teach my class how to write scripts. I'm going to have them watch Degrassi and analyze it and pitch story ideas to the actual Degrassi cast. So they had these two actors here, Siliak Sasanasi and Irene Karakos, who, while I was working on this project, followed me on Instagram, which was crazy. And I hadn't interacted with her or brought this up to her or anything. So that was pretty cool. So now we're Instagram friends, which is nice. And they got to act out the story ideas that everybody brought up. So we're going to mimic this as closely as we can. Of course, Heinz had an entire semester or entire month to work on this project. We're going to be going through it in about an hour, 2 hours together. The second thing that's different is we're not necessarily worried about learning how to write a script. Mostly just coming up with a creative idea about Degrassi. It can be written in any way that you like. And unfortunately, there are no Degrassi cast members here. Well, there is season 12 episode whatever extra is here today. But maybe someday this can transform into something much, much cooler. So we have 3 goals that we're going to try to accomplish tonight as a creative writing team. First, we're going to try to study a character of our choosing. So if you already have an idea and there's a character you're already working on, or you want to come up with an idea tonight, we're going to look at how to pick characters for Degrassi and how to analyze them through Heinz's assignment. Then we'll pitch some ideas about ideas for these characters. And then at the very end, I have the study hall booked for us, so we can work on silent writing or our own projects or whatever we'd like after the event is over. Before we begin, I want to let you guys know, too, that this kind of style of assignment can literally be applied to any TV show, any movie, any type of book if you wanted to write your own extended story. But the main thing is understanding the rules of whatever you're writing for. So if you were going to write for Marvel, for example, you'd want to make sure you're familiar with their superheroes, what their powers are. And as Degrassi fans, we know there's a few general rules that Degrassi follows. One, because they cast real teenagers, the show is usually through the teenage lens and the teenage voice, which also means that adults don't tend to come in and save the day. And also, sometimes you might have finer details you remember. Like if you're writing a story about Craig, you want to remember his relation or his family history and his relationships. Or if you're writing about Spinner, it might be important to remember that he has ADHD. Or maybe Emma really loves the environment. It's important to know kind of the rules of the game that you're playing. The first thing I want to ask from the group is there any kind of rule you might want to keep in mind if you're writing for a Degrassi or a specific character in Degrassi? I'm looking for an audience participation credit on this one.
I would say something around the rules of the game. You know how they're big on that, having that Bible,
yes.
And not going outside of Degrassi reality.
Yes, I absolutely love that. Yeah, Degrassi. So as what Shane's talking about is a TV show Bible. So it's especially helpful on a TV show like Degrassi, which The Next Generation, which has 14 seasons. If you were coming in as a writer on season 13, there's no way you're going to sit down and watch hundreds and hundreds of episodes. Instead, they have this Bible that play the rules of the game. And one of the rules that they have is Degrassi is a show that's pretty much founded in reality. I remember one of the things they said specifically is you can go one step outside of reality. So someone like Stephanie K, for example, can pretend that Arthur isn't her brother for a little bit, but not a teenager couldn't get away with it for an entire year or for the rest of her life. So it will eventually come up at some point. So that's a really great point about the TV shows having Bibles. Oh yes. Hi, Amber. Welcome. The other fun thing about this is that this specifically is a creative writing assignment. So in this reality, you can do whatever you like. If you want to make a story about JT being an alien, you can do that. If you don't even want to write a script, you want to challenge yourself to write about a topic from Toby's perspective, and maybe he does a podcast on it, you can do absolutely anything. Step 1 is, of course, choosing a character that you would like to write about. So you might write a story with several characters, but usually it'll be through the lens of one person specifically. In a creative writing assignment, I mean, you can also choose yourself. You can do a crossover with other movies, other shows, other generations. But for the sake of this exercise, we'll focus specifically on characters on Degrassi. And I actually want to throw it out to the group, whether you unmute and say an answer or type it in the chat. Who is a Degrassi character that might be a good person to write about? Whether you have an idea already prepared or not.
I mean, personally, I've always wanted to, like, I've always said that Adam was the one that opened my life out, so.
I like that. And what do you think it is about Adam that would make him a great character to write for?
I mean, there's so much, like, when he did his coming out to Claire and Eli, it just helped me realize that this is who I was, and it just sparked that light bulb for me and how I wanted to plan my coming out.
I love that. I also see in the chat, Nixon has said Marco, Amber has said Terry. Specifically looking at those two, what's really nice about picking main characters is that if you come up with a scenario, you kind of have an idea of how they're going to react. We know so much about Marco and Terry that if we put them in kind of any situation, we can kind of come up with in our minds what we think they might do. I also see Shane said he has a plan for Luke from Degrassi Junior High. Luke is one of those middle characters where we've seen a lot of him enough to kind of know his personality, but we haven't learned too much about him yet, so that you could really expand on him as a character, which is really, really cool. And no surprise at all with Sierra saying Melanie and LD. I think those are great examples. Maybe those two kissing. That would be a great episode to do together. Yeah, those are great answers. I love that. So what's really fun is I've actually picked a Degrassi character that we're going to work through together on going through Heinz's assignment. I think you'd probably think that I would pick someone like Fiona or something like that, but I actually decided to pick Heather Sinclair. Heather Sinclair is one of those characters that we know hardly anything about. The only reason we learn about Heather is because other people are talking about Heather, and I felt like it would be so fun to play with her, build a backstory, find out why she's such a B word to everybody, and go through this lesson trying to figure out if we can come up with an idea for Heather Sinclair. So step 1, pick your character. Step 2 is choosing an episode that features your character and analyzing them. So it's good to start with an episode that they're the main character of or they're featured in. They usually have a goal that they're trying to get to by the end of the episode. Something is usually standing in their way, and then they overcome some kind of obstacle. So in any of the characters that we've thrown out, whether it's Adam, Marco, Terry, Melanie, LD, can we think of an episode where they had a goal in mind, but something was standing in their way?
I think for Melanie specifically, in The Great Race, she had a goal of getting a bra and figuring out her growing body, and her mom was standing in her way. Her mom didn't think she was ready for it yet.
Yeah, and then how did she overcome that obstacle? What did she do?
She overcame it by going to a bra store on her own with her friend LD instead.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we learn about characters is through their actions of how they react to these challenges. So some characters might have said, well, my mom, like Vula, for example, would be like, well, my parents said I can't do this, so I'm not going to do it. But Melanie was like, well, how can I try to make this happen anyway? So we learn a lot about what people are willing to do when something is standing in their goal. I also see Amber said Terry's attempt to get Spinner. That is a great example of someone having a goal in their way, and then the choices that they make as a character to overcome them. So these are fun things to think about when you're trying to build a character for a story and coming up with a pitch that you might want to have. And when it comes to Heather Sinclair, for example, she doesn't have a lot of episodes that she's featured in. She doesn't have really any situations where she has a goal, something is standing in her way, and we see her overcome them. So the fun part about that is I get to kind of make it up and analyze the stuff that we do know and put some perspective to it. When it comes to Heather, the way that we learn about Heather is often through other people. Paige talks about Heather, Marco talks about Heather, Terry talks about Heather, Holly J talks about Heather a lot. And there's also some tiny pieces of media where we can learn about Heather in this mini-sode. This one is called Beware of Heather Sinclair. technically it is a dream sequence where Paige embodies Heather, but we learn a lot. We learn about what Paige would think about Heather in her actions. We learn a lot about the other characters reacting to Heather in this scenario. So we're going to watch it, and then we're going to kind of fill in our own opinions on what we think Heather's goals, obstacles, and opinions are in this.
Attention, Degrassi. Remember, today is the ultimate recycling challenge against Lakers, so do your part.
Yeah, right. It's Degrassi's own Ebony and Ivory. Do you guys, like, try to look exactly alike, or does it just naturally happen?
Just happens. Don't talk to her. Oh, sorry, G.
You better run, Gerald. Emma Nelson, you're looking fine these days.
Thanks, Heather.
Never would have thought it possible during all those awkward activist years, huh? Yikes. No comeback? Didn't think so. You know, Jimmy, I just wanted to say that I really admire you.
Oh, thanks. Heather, that's surprisingly nice of you.
The way you keep spin dangling, never quite forgiving him for the shooting, passive-aggressively awesome.
And there it is. Wheeled right into that one.
You know what, Liberty?
I'll save you the trouble, Heather, okay? My ex is in love with another girl who has a baby. Yes, I'm aware of the irony, and they're opening up a daycare together, all happy. Yes, my life sucks. Thanks.
And my work here is done. Hey, Peter. Blue really brings out the evil in your eyes.
Cool.
Oh, he's hot. Wow, what a great ensemble.
Really? This old thing?
Now that I get a better look at it, it is old. I'm gonna need you to move your Value Village butt away from my locker.
Hey, Degrassi, don't forget the annual Retro 80s dance is this Friday. $10 at the door. Everyone is invited unless you're Heather Sinclair.
Oh, no wonder no one likes Heather Sinclair. What a bitch.
Okay, here we go. So, in this kind of scenario, what I would have to do is imply a lot of what I think about Heather and her goals. So, in my perspective, when I think about Heather Sinclair and her goals at Degrassi, I think her goal is to establish her dominance at Degrassi. She's someone who is the queen bee and wants to be the queen bee at Degrassi. So she'll do, in my perception, she'll do whatever she can to maintain that. When it comes to the things that are standing in her way in this scene, it literally is the other Degrassi kids between her and her locker. There's a physical sense there. And to me, what I interpret is that the things that are standing in her way is she wants everybody to feel like she's commandeering the scene. So she makes the attempt to attack first, kind of. So how does she react to her challenges? She's going to be right in your face about it. She's going to tell you what she thinks. She's not going to be afraid. And if I'm going to interpret that into why Heather, I almost called her Holly J, why Heather does that, I think she is quite literally the embodiment of hurt people. If I had to analyze why Heather is so quick to punch the gut of other people, for the sake of building my own character, I'm going to say it's because she wants to punch first so other people can't hurt her. But step 3 in that process is repeating that a few more times. And one of the things I suggest is not only finding episodes that your character is the center of attention of, but also finding episodes where they're a supporting character. How does their behavior or their story change whenever they're playing someone who's more supported? Twine now ship Heather and Peter. I love that. How does it change whenever they're not the main center of the conflict and they're a supportive role? So there are a few more times that we learn about Heather Sinclair, and this one is one of my favorites. It's about 1.5 minutes long, and we mostly learn about Heather through other people. So let's watch this one next too.
It's talent time, Degrassi. Bring your lunch to the gymnasium for our talent showcase.
Wow, that Sav guy sure is hot. No, Manny, I call him. Don't worry, I don't go after 10th graders. So you gonna talk to him?
It just seems soon. After my last boyfriend.
Mia, the past is the past. Carpe diem. Seize the Sav.
Many have tried, none have succeeded. Especially ones with baby weight.
Now what would I do without Holly J. Sinclair looking out for me?
Hold on. Holly J. Sinclair? As in Heather Sinclair?
She's my sister.
Wait, boyfriend stealing, bad nose job having, puppy drowning, queen of evil is your sister?
Taught me everything she knows.
This might be a problem, sweetie. What? Why? Listen, I have to debate her tomorrow morning. Tell me everything.
Let's just say if Holly J and Heather share the same DNA, you're gonna have to fight fire with huge, enormous flames.
Got a light?
I have a particular liking to that scene. Oh, you're right. They don't share the same DNA. I wonder if they knew that back then. One of the things that I love about that scene is that Heather literally doesn't appear. Like, she's not in the scene. She's not in the show. And yet we can still learn so much information about her. So from that scene, we haven't even met Heather Sinclair. But what did we learn about her? Can anyone give me a suggestion?
She drowned a puppy.
I like that. We learn basically that not only is Heather Sinclair BITCH, but everyone knows it, and even just being related to her is gonna have that kind of situation around her. One of the other things that makes Heather fun to write for, in my opinion, is she kind of reminds me of the monster from Jaws, the shark, because a lot of the time you don't actually see the shark in the movie Jaws. Most of the fear that you get is the water scenes with the music playing, and you instead have to fill in your own mind the scariest thing you can think of. That is pretty much Heather Sinclair. Or the Blair Witch. We don't know what the Blair Witch looks like. We have to fill that in with our own brains. So that's what I really like about the idea of writing for Heather Sinclair. The other resource that we get is this here. We have the Degrassi wiki, which might help you if you're looking for little details to tell about your character. But one thing that I love about Heather is that we see her first introduction here. We see the first time that she's mentioned, never seen, is when Terry and Paige are talking about her. Paige wants to get that agent. And Terry says, not only does Heather, or Terry says, hey, oh my gosh, Terry says Heather already has an agent, and Paige Michaelchuk is disgusted because she has an overbite. And the thing about learning that about her is that the intention of that isn't to teach us that she has an overbite. It's to teach us that she has a conflict with Paige that has predated our first hearing about her at the beginning. So am I back up here? Okay, perfect. Did I get everything? Okay, great. So those are the first 3 steps. Basically, pick a character, watch some episodes that they're in, and learn a little bit about how they react to their struggles. Soon we'll hear more about what the characters that you picked, but I got 2 more steps to tell you about. Step 4 is asking what-if questions about your character. So something that helped me in preparing for this is thinking, for example, what if Heather Sinclair got detention? Because the thing is about each character is they're going to each react differently to that. And when it comes to Heather, I'm a little perplexed because she's a mean girl, which would imply that she may end up in trouble a lot at school. But she's also very involved at Degrassi. At one point, she does a Highland sword dance. And then at another point, she does a Celtic winter solstice dance. And to me, that doesn't mesh with the typical idea of a mean girl. A typical mean girl might be embarrassed by doing those kinds of things, but not Heather. And why is that? How does that shape how I would write her as a character? Some other questions I might pose for myself is, what if Heather failed a test? How would she react? Because if you had a character like Liberty fail a test and you had a character like Joey Jeremiah fail a test, those are going to be 2 different outcomes in how those characters react to their obstacles. So some universe questions. This is a shout out to Nicholas. What would happen on Degrassi if Heather had a crush on Peter Stone and they were together? That's interesting. What if Heather came back during Degrassi in season 11? What if Heather never got mono, which we'll talk about in a minute? These are questions that can help you build your character building, even if it's not necessarily working towards the actual story you'll tell. It might help flip up some ideas. So I'm curious, why don't I'll ask a question to the group. Think of a Degrassi character, and I want you to tell me if that character came to school, realized that they totally forgot about a big test, they haven't studied, it's worth 30% of their grade. What do they do? How do they overcome that obstacle? Oh, I like that. Amber said, well, we've seen Spinner. He would try to cheat or delay it twice. Absolutely. That's one of the things about Spinner is he's such a well-defined character that we know exactly how he would react in that situation. He's going to probably try to move that test or get himself through it in an unethical way, which I love it. Esme would either skip class or wing it and ace it. I absolutely love that. These are great ways that can help you putting your characters into different situations and asking what would they do can help you understand more when you're writing your own story of how they would naturally react in these situations. I'll see if anything else pops up in the chat, and then if not, we'll move on to step
I'll
5.
do a verbal one if you can
Yeah.
hear me.
Please, I would love that.
I'm just gonna go with Peter because it was the last character that I heard before I started thinking. I think that Peter wouldn't care either way. He's never been studious, and he has this like air of I can get away with anything at this school.
I love
So I
that.
think he would show up. I think he would show up to the class late, not do the test, and then go and complain to his mom and be like, it's just not fair the way that they gave me the test when I showed up late.
I love that. That's a very good answer, Nicholas. Especially because we learned a couple of those things about Peter throughout the way, like the way that he steals those locker combinations because his mom's the principal, and how many times he stands up to her. That's a very, very good answer, Nicholas. I like that. Amber said Yale would definitely freak out. She seems like a scholarly person. Oh, I totally agree. Their world would end. It would be over. Melanie would totally cram as much as possible the period beforehand and have anxiety and do her best, but be so scared until she got to see how she did. I like that. And I imagine Kathleen would be picking on her, being like, Melanie, why didn't you study? I told you yesterday. And that would be some good conflict. Allie says, I mean, we had Claire set off the stink bomb when Fitz and Adam were going to fight, so maybe another stink bomb could go off again. That's very fun. I like the stink bomb idea. That's very, very cool. Great participation on that one. That was awesome. I'm only going to talk for a couple more minutes, and then we'll hear more story ideas. But next we'll move on to step 5, if you were to complete this work assignment. Step 5 is brainstorming 2 or 3 ideas for your character. So asking what if questions can help you come up with ideas if you're stuck, or even help you build characters together. So it can help you also realize maybe a different idea. I know when I started this, I had an idea in mind, and I completely changed it once I asked myself some questions about Heather. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually read you. I've come up with 3 pitches for this assignment if I was going to write a story about Heather. And here I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. One story I came up with is an ultimate version of Jagged Little Pill. I've always had an interest in the line that Paige says in her first episode, which is New Year, New Look, New Paige. And I think we all kind of have thought about before, well, what was Paige like before this? And later we immediately hear that she's snarky towards Heather. This is the things that we're learning about her, that she has this conflict. And I've always wondered if the two are connected. Did something happen between Paige and Heather behind the scenes that caused Paige to enter this kind of like queen bee universe? So I have a theory that they were best friends and had a falling out, and now they're rivals, with Paige maybe trying to step up and become more like Heather. So my first pitch for an idea for Heather Sinclair is basically Jagged Little Pill, the sleepover at the end of season 1. What if that actually took place a year earlier? And that is the starting point of the conflict between Heather and Paige, which leads to that line and maybe leads to Hazel being the new friend in the group. That's one story that I might choose to write about. A second story idea I had with Heather, it's basically all just kind of alternate universes, but you can come up with whatever you like. I was also thinking about the episode Time Stands Still, which is the school shooting episode. Remember in the actual school shooting episode, Jimmy replaces Heather on the quiz team because she has mono. And my question is, well, what if that never happened? And the storyline that happened to Emma, what if that happened to Heather Sinclair instead? So Time Stands Still, alternate universe. To help boost her extracurriculars, Heather is paired alongside Jimmy, Toby, and Rick for the Whack Your Brain quiz show. Rick misunderstands Heather's attention after she uses her popularity to save him from a moment of bullying with Spinner. How does this story change if Heather is the one who rejects Rick's advances after the paint and feathers incident? So that might be a script idea that I might write about. And then the third one I thought about would be happened around the time of the episode You Don't Know, around season 11. So we remember that Holly J ends up getting sick. So after Holly J is diagnosed with kidney failure, Heather Sinclair appears at Degrassi to finally be the big sister Holly J has always needed. Meanwhile, Simpson cowers in his office to stay clear of Heather and must keep himself occupied for the entire day. So that one I threw in a little silly B-plot. I imagine if Heather Sinclair came to Degrassi, I wonder if Simpson would actually just be terrified and want to avoid her for the whole time. But I thought that might be interesting setup. Like maybe Heather comes and Holly J thinks it's because she's going to give her a kidney. And this is the moment that Heather says like, hey, I have to tell you something. Like, you're actually adopted. So those are some ideas that I would come up with. And that leads to the fun part, which is step 6. Those are 3 ideas that I could explore about Heather using Heinz's assignment and all the things I've learned about character building. And a tip I have is to try to write a pitch for your story so people can understand what your story is and why it matters, or you can understand what your story is and why it matters. And it can help you think of the plot a little bit. So if anyone does want to write a pitch at any point, the way that I like to describe it is it's a summary, but also a teaser. So you want your audience to know what the episode or what your story is going to be about, enough to pull them in, but also enough that it doesn't spoil the whole episode and you just give it away. So for example, a great time that they do that is this episode called Friday Night. They describe it as Jimmy and Spinner are given detention by Miss Kwan, so they vow revenge by pulling pranks on her, but eventually they start to realize that they may have gone too far. So the inciting incident happens in the first part of the episode where they end up getting detention, and the rest does happen, but it doesn't give away all the answers. It makes us want to know what pranks, how have they gone too far, why do they look so somber? And the best part is now I'm officially done of all my yapping, and I want to hear your Degrassi ideas. Is there any story that you've been thinking that you want to tell about Degrassi, or just that you think would be interesting to see?
I mean, I've been thinking, honestly, quite a bit. Like, I think it was season 12. I can't remember what episode. I know it was part of Doll Parts where Adam and his mom were discussing about the discussion about him starting hormone replacement therapy. I wanted to see, like a continuation of how that was going to turn out. Had that discussion.
Oh, that's a really good one. That's ones that I think is really interesting. Those gaps of like what they insinuate happened on the show. Like I see Amber said, I want to see when Paige and Spinner actually kiss. Like he hits at it at part in the mini. That the stuff that we hear happened off screen but didn't actually happen. I think that would be cool. Oh yeah, sorry.
Because
Carrie.
I know.
Yeah,
because in season 13, when they are in the hospital for Adam, they mentioned that he was on hormone. He was on the blockers, but we don't know how that started.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be really, really fun. I had kind of similar thoughts with that about Ellie's self-harm episode. I did a breakdown on that, and I think it would be interesting if, whether it was a mini-sode or whether it was in the episode, I really wish Degrassi would have done more talking to counselors and seeing what that looks like. They do it in a few moments with like an abortion clinic or mental health experts. But I really would have loved to see if Ellie had spoken to someone, maybe at the kids' help phone, and what that looked like. I think that would have helped me as a teenager get over that fear of actually talking to someone about it. Sierra says, what if Melanie's dad started dating a married woman while still married to her mom a few days before the Great Race? Oh, that's a fun one. Evie Pacini said, Esme returning to school after doing inpatient therapy over the summer after Next Class season 4 and trying to find her place in social circles. It'd be cool to see her interact with different characters with varying level of knowledge of her past and how different characters would treat her. I think Audra said they could find a doctor, but that was the last they discussed it to my memory. Oh, that would be very, very cool. I love specifically the part of different characters knowing different things about her. That's amazing. Shane has an episode teaser. Yes, Shane. Whether you want to read it or drop it in chat, I would be very, very happy to see it. Very, very happy. Because I also know that Evie, I think, Evie is a fan fiction writer as well. So, Evie, do you want to drop your 90 chapter fanfic in chat as well? All words of it? Oh, okay, perfect. This is Shane's teaser. Luke experiences flashbacks and guilt over Shane's bridge fall. Sensations that have worsened since Luke helped Shane return to visit Degrassi. Meanwhile, Trish is turning to drinking to cope with her father's very public trial and imprisonment, for which Luke bullies her in remedial class. An unexpected turn of events brings Trish some relief and Luke some redemption. Oh, I really, really like that. I really, really like that. I also know that you kind of have a soft spot for Trish, so that makes me excited to see how you would fulfill her or flesh her out as a character and give her more, especially because we know how we feel about the fact that she was the lead of Kids at Degrassi Street and then not in Degrassi Junior High. That is very, very good. Shane, you get an A+. Can I react with an A? Sierra said, what if LD noticed that her feelings for Wheels were actually because she wanted to be him? Oh, listen, I love any type of gender or sexuality storyline, so I would be all up on that. I'm also curious, another question I have for you guys is, what is your favorite style to write in? Like, are any of you interested in writing scripts? Are you more short stories? Do you like fan fiction? What are the ways that you guys like to write? I personally love writing essays, which I then turn into audio essays through my podcast, which I really, really like.
I had assumed you were thinking of it in terms of a script, but now that you mention it, yeah, lots of different ways would be good, including the novel forms, which I know Sierra loves.
Yes, exactly. Or even in your specific example, it might be interesting to see like if Luke had a journal, what would he write about? Or if Shane had a journal, or any type of things that the Degrassi kids wrote from their own perspective, how would that change if they're in control of their own narrative?
Definitely.
Definitely. Amber said short stories, but I'm no good at actually getting the ideas out of my head. That is okay, Amber. That's the hardest part when it comes to writing. I can't tell you how many ideas exist in my brain that have never once made it to a piece of paper. Evie said script writing is fun, but harder. Me and Evie are both actually film school. Well, I didn't graduate. I stopped after COVID. But Evie's actually a film school grad, so Evie can write real good scripts. I actually specifically went to film school. Basically, it was during COVID and there's nothing to do in the world. And I decided to go to film school so I could learn a little bit more about Degrassi and how they make the show and write the show and different filming techniques. And so I did all the introductory classes, and I was like, that was good enough for me once COVID lit up. But that's a great idea. I also think one experiment that I would like to try sometime is writing a column for the Degrassi Digest. Reporting on something as a Degrassi kid, or even an opinion piece or a gossip column, I think would be fun. I almost said Daisy said. Sierra said, I like to just notice the chemistry and vibes that characters give, then elaborate verbally, mostly talking to myself and then writing it down. How I feel about them and what it could mean if my feelings were true. I love that. I mean, that's pretty much exactly what I did with Heather Sinclair, is I tried to figure out, hey, you know, I know she's the queen bee, but she's got to be a person sometimes. What's behind that version of her? Ali said, truthfully, if we had the episode of Degrassi where Adam being able to start hormones and have the discussion about it with the doctor and his mom, that would have been so much easier for me to be able to explain to my mom and about myself. Oh, that's the great thing about Degrassi, is using it as a resource to help yourself. I like that. Okay, I'm gonna continue on. I do have a few more slides here to wrap up the actual assignment, and then I may also be able to show you the one that I did for this. Step 7. So after you do all those things, if you were to continue this assignment, step 7 is writing your story. So a fun exercise to start with is, sometimes when we write, we want to start at the beginning and work to the end. But sometimes what can really help you flush things out is picking somewhere in the middle. So writing a scene, maybe in the middle of your script, or even writing, if you're writing a short story, maybe writing out just a conversation between two characters. For example, what would Emma's diary look like if the day after she found out about her dad? Or what would Melanie's notebook look like in class if she was scribbling about her crush all day? Or even, what if you were Shantae and you were writing a gossip column about Craig and Manny? You could do absolutely anything to try to pick your brain. Oh, I see Amber says a diary is right up for Allie. I love that. I think that's really cool, because then you get inside the characters from their own perspective and you learn a little bit more about them. So whether you're writing, oh, bye Shane, thank you so much. We'll see you soon. Whether you're writing fan fiction, a script, whether you're writing a diary entry, really the next step 7, is to get started and start writing on it. And I encourage you guys to, if you do actually write something from this, I encourage you to share it in Degrassi and we can all chat about it. I actually have mine, which I can share, and then we can move over to the study hall after we wrap up. But let me just open it. So what I chose to do is I tried to do a script from a scene, I imagine, from the sleepover, if it was happening in this alternate universe that I pitched about Heather and Paige. So I imagine there might be a scene at Heather Sinclair's house. I imagine that Heather lives in a very bright, beautiful home, fully furnished, family photos on the wall. And I imagine that if they're at a sleepover together, a stack of board games sits on the table. Terry rummages through them while Heather stands presiding over her court. So getting that idea that Heather knows that she's better than everyone, or thinks that she is. Terry says, Twister? Heather says, that game is for babies. Holly J wants to play it like all the time. Terry says, okay, what about Clue? Heather says, Paige, your friend is a total bore. Paige gives an apologetic look to Terry, and Heather motions towards her PlayStation 2. Heather says, besides, I want to play something fun, like American Idol. You guys can even pick my audition song. Ashley says, can't we find something we can do together? Heather says, when we have a sleepover at your house, then we can play what you want, Ashley. Paige whispers, as if you'd ever let us go anywhere else, Napoleon. Heather overhears. She fumes. You just don't want to play because you can't sing. Paige says, Heather, fine. We can play American Idol. Terry whispers, she can be Simon Cowell. Paige and Terry share a laugh. Ashley knows what's coming. Heather says, Terry, why don't you go first? The audience always needs someone to laugh at. Terry says, oh, I can sing, Heather, and I bet I can do it better than you. Heather says directly to Paige, are you going to let your friend talk to me like that? Paige can't get out her words. Terry says, Paige isn't responsible for what I say, just like she's not responsible for how you feel about it. You should be nicer to your friends. Heather looks at Paige with daggers in her eyes. Paige says, she's right, Heather. You can be kind of direct, I guess. Heather says, you're just jealous. You've acted so different ever since my dad got that promotion, and you've never gotten over the fact that I had a boyfriend first. Ashley says, I don't know if Dancing with Spinner, your grade 3 sock hop, counts, Heather. Ashley tries to diffuse the situation, or the tension. Everyone laughs. Paige and Terry nearly fall over each other. Heather says directly to Paige, at least I don't try to hide my gay brother. Paige's face drops. She sits silent. Tears well up in her eyes. Ashley says, Dylan? Heather says, why keep secrets? Are you embarrassed or something? Terry says, that's not your secret to tell. Heather stands firm. She's not budging. Paige says, let's just go. Heather can spend another night all alone while her parents forget she exists. Heather breaks for a moment, then stiffens up. Paige and Terry grab their stuff. They storm upstairs. Ashley gets up. Sorry, Heather. Call if your mom doesn't come home, okay? So that's the idea that I came up with was, oh, thank you. I got a clap. Thank you, Evie. Evie also helped me edit it, so thank you. I imagine there might be this situation where maybe Paige was a little more cowardly towards Heather, and maybe in this hypothetical world, she was starting to become closer to Terry, invited Terry over, and we know that after a little bit, Terry can stand up and speak her mind and say what needs to be right and what's wrong, and perhaps that's what led to the downfall of Paige and Heather in my hypothetical universe. So, that is the assignment, and that's what you would do if you were in Heinz Sanger's class writing about Degrassi. Evie says, love the Paige, Terry, Ashley, Heather dynamic. I think so too. It's really fun to write for those characters and totally explore them. Sarah said, beautifully written and read, truly captured the character we know well and gave a nude side to Heather. Oh, I like that. That's what I think. I think that Heather's probably got to be a hurt person. I imagine maybe similar to Jimmy. Her parents aren't around that much. And maybe she tries to punch first so she doesn't feel hurt. But now we're going to transition over to study hall. So I'm curious if anyone actually has a project that they're going to work on tonight, whether it's this project or whether it's something else. Do you guys have anything on the go for projects? Oh, Nick said, it's interesting to me how Terry takes on a similar role to what Paige does there later on in the series. I love that, Nicholas. I love that. Ooh, Sarah said, I need to edit the new pod, but I'm going to save that for tomorrow. I'd rather do this. I like that. I absolutely like that. Cool. Oh, Amber said, I think I'm going to work on my diary entry. I like that. I like that.
I wrote out 3 pictures on my little notebook because you know me, I'm a notebook and paper person.
Would you mind reading one of them to us?
Okay, so I already put the one about Melanie and her dad in the chat, and the one about LD and her gender identity. So I wrote one for after LD notices that they might be queer, they might be trans. I wrote, what if Lucy and LD had a secret relationship while Lucy was dating Paul? Because Lucy had internalized homophobia, but then Lucy found LD's journal about them questioning their gender identity.
Oh, I like that. I would literally love if that was like an entire season of a breakdown. That would be amazing.
I know you really ship Lucy and LD the same way I do.
I mean, she made a whole freaking video series for her while she was sick. That was like the most romantic thing I've ever seen. Nicholas says I got a video to edit. I'll also do a little breakdown of my new Heather and Peter ship. I like that. And if you guys don't mind, I would love to reference these in the my Patreon post of just being like, hey, these are the kind of things we came up with. I like that. Ali says I'm probably going to put together ideas for my new book, but that's been really hard for me to do since drawing ideas aren't really there right now. Oh, I totally get that. Writer's block is real and true. That's why sometimes when it comes to fiction writing, doing stuff like this is really helpful because I originally was like, I don't know what character I would write about. And then this helped a lot.